Good morning, Maurice.
Hello.
And good morning, everyone. It is morning for me. I am Lauren Albandian, the owner and coordinator of NORWAC, the Northwest Astrological Conference. Our conference this year is May 27th through the 31st, and it'll be completely virtual. You can find information at norwac.net. Schedule is up and active, and you can find out more information about speakers. And Maurice is one of our speakers this year for the 2021 conference. Let me tell you a little bit that I know about Maurice. I'll be reading his bio. So he's the author of the book Neptune, as the 12th house in Pisces. It's come out as a new edition. And The Astrology and the Evolution of Consciousness, Volume 1, is a leading evolutionary astrology counselor and teacher, currently based in Arizona, Sedona. Beautiful place. Maurice served as the president of the Organization of Professional Astrology, OPA. If you don't know about that, you can find out more at opaastrology.com. He was president for 3 terms from 2014 to 2020 and has organized multiple astrology conferences across the world and currently directs a professional diploma program supporting and shaping a future generation of astrologers. You can find more information about Maurice at mauricefernandez.com. So you've got 2 lectures. You've got one called The Spiritual Development in the Chart. Let's start with that. So tell me more about that.
Well, I'm looking at where we're at now globally and also by transits. And it seems like with Neptune being in the sign of Pisces and Jupiter moving into Pisces this summer and then forming a conjunction with Neptune, these are 2 planets that represent our aspiration, to find higher meaning, to go beyond the material world. And yet, at the same time, what I find is that we first of all need to understand what spirituality is. When I ask people, so what does that mean to have a spiritual leaning? What does that mean to look at your spiritual development in your chart? It's not just about having a practice or meditating or whatnot. So it's very much about existential questions and understanding our relationship between our daily life, ourselves, our ego, and forces that are larger than us. And understanding basically, I would say that interplay between fate and free will. What is up to us? What is not up to us? And how to ultimately find our way and find happiness. To me, spirituality is the science and practice of happiness. And so, it doesn't matter how much you meditate or what your job is, if you're consciously in that process. So I know that Neptune and Jupiter have a big role in that because both of them represent this tendency from mania and depression. Going euphoric, everything's great, I manifest my positive potential, that need to force almost happiness, to deny the shadow and to look at how positive everything is.
Well, that's spiritual bypassing.
Yeah.
Right?
And that leads to crashes. So we're going to examine, that question from that point of view, but also look at how do we see that in the charts? Because, it's one thing to look at a transit that's happening now, and the conjunction will be exact next April 2022. But then how do we look at spiritual breakthroughs in our own natal charts? What are the factors? What can be important triggers? So people can understand the concept, but also personalize it.
That's excellent, because people, I mean, it is a big question for my clientele and for yours as well, because that's where you're coming from. You're going to attract that. And being able to assess or delineate that kind of development in the natal chart, I think is important and quite valuable.
Yeah. And, once again, sometimes people don't call it spirituality, but it is that relationship between you and your own life. And even, some people may go through a crisis where, they feel hopeless or, consider suicide. And that's a spiritual crisis.
It is. It is.
So that's, it may be triggered by a bankruptcy, it may be triggered by the loss of job, but the deeper feeling of giving up has to do with your relationship with your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I hope it's going to be something that, I try, my premise, whatever I do, is to explore these vast questions, but to bring them to a practical level so that it's useful. It's not just, philosophy.
It's not ephemeral, philosophical, abstract. I'm with you. Bring it into some usable, tangible way into our lives, because spirituality is, for me, putting life into practice, right? It's living your life. It's not separate. A spiritual life is not separate from the physical reality of our existence. It is it is all of it. So kudos. All right. So your second lecture is called The Ascendant, a succession to the 12th house. What do you mean by that?
Well, I like to look at astrology from a cycle point of view. Mm-hmm. And so we look at the ascendant, which is the first house. And, we don't often realize or remember that actually planets are rising into the 12th house, to begin with. And the 12th house, has its a whole range of difficult associations, when in fact, that's when we see the first ray of light, really. As you wrote my bio, I wrote a whole book on it, on the 12th house. And so I understand from my point of view and from what I've experienced that there's an immediate correlation between the 12th house and the first house, because one represents the ending of a cycle, the 12th, and the first house is the beginning of a cycle. And how do they actually talk to each other? We tend to look at the 12th house as the last house, so it's as far away from the first as you can think, but it's actually the one that came before. So it's a bit of a pregnancy phase.
Definitely.
Prior to that birthing in the first house. Mm-hmm. And, that one thing, for example, many people who are, say, Leo rising, are not necessarily people who love the stage or extroverted, because there's Cancer in the 12th. And there's something about the fact that they're still in the Cancer phase and growing into the Leo phase. So it's something they are growing into. It's not a given.
I agree. I am a Leo rising. I have forced myself out into the world. It is not something I readily wanted to do. In fact, Mom was always pushing me out there, and I was like, no. She pushed me out there because she was a Leo rising, because she didn't want to do it either.
Well, it's interesting because it's not, you're not the only one. I've met several Leo rising.
Yes.
Who
Many.
Are shy.
Yes.
And they don't understand, like, I'm supposed to be this glamorous and outspoken and, comfortable on stage. So we're going to explore all the signs from this point of view, basically, understand the process of ending and beginnings.
Love it.
So, of course, looking at the rulers, if you're Leo rising, where the sun is, etc.
Well, that is a big piece. It's a very big piece, Mom, Maggie, for those who don't know, Maggie Nalbandian, who started NORWAC, she's Leo rising, she's passed, with the ruler in the 8th. She did not like stepping out into the limelight.
Yeah.
Right. So that I agree with you. That the ruler of the chart, the ruler of the ascendant, is quite significant where it lands, and in part of the interpretation. All right. So thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, just that I'm excited to come to NORWAC. I think my first NORWAC was 2003. As a speaker, but 94 as a participant.
Really?
Yeah.
94. Wow. I was behind the scenes in 94, so I wasn't really out looking at people. I was hiding.
Well, to me, it was very meaningful because I wasn't living in the States yet, and I came to this big conference, and all the people whose books I read were there in person, and it was really I was starstruck. But I think what I like about NORWAC is the diversity. You have traditional astrology, you have psychological, evolutionary, and it's a strong sense of community. So I'm excited to do it again.
Thank you. I think as much as I'm looking forward to 2021 and creating that kind of community virtually that we were able to accomplish last year, I'm really longing for a return to an in-person process. I'm looking at you, but there's something when we're both, taking up the same space, in the same space, talking to one another, there's just something more. We know that. And so I want us to come back to an in-person conference. So, the universe willing, and humanity's will to move, get itself vaccinated or do whatever it has to do to deal with this pandemic. Yeah. Hopefully in 2022 we'll be able to. Thank you, Maurice, for taking the time to spend with me this morning and telling us more about what you'll be doing. We'll look forward to that.